Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, the Ruler School Circuit Series now offering our Quarter 2 2024 circuit kits, and our guest lecturer members, Fight Ramen. Class is in session. Deck. There we go.
Very much so.
Hey there, rulers. Welcome back after a long week of Force of Will. Yes, we were talking before the podcast. It's crazy that we do that. Sometimes we actually plan for stuff. We're glad to have you here. Welcome back after a long week of Force of Will and maybe playing in the Converging Wills event to Office Hours, your favorite ever live Force of Will podcast featuring myself, DMO73, and I'm joined as always by Paul Reisman.
Getting Mike images. Please hold.
And Mike Rance.
I've never read a Force Will card in my life.
That's not true. That's not true.
I like the
You've
pretty
read
pictures.
At least four. You've read at least four. Faria, Some Way to Reanimate the Pregnant Lady, and the Inheritance Person to Pump Up Pregnant Lady. So you've read at least four cards, right? There we go.
There's not much to read there, but that's fine.
Not much to read there. So as we get into it, I do want to say thank you all so much for being here. If you like what we're doing, you want to consider supporting us financially, you can always click that join button down below, or even just being here and hitting that subscribe button, liking the video and sharing it out. We appreciate you. It helps us to be able to get more content. I appreciate you all kind of getting into the letting us get caught up as we've me have recovered from being sick. We are glad to be back in the heat of event discussion, meta discussion, and some cool spoiler news. There's some cool stuff. There's some cool stuff going on. So, Mike, do you have card images yet?
I do, in fact. Paul was kind enough to send things to me.
Great. 2 pin, 3 videos last week. Yeah, we were working on it. We were trying to get kind of caught back up. The hope is that this week we will have a feature match, a progression series video, and 2 deck profiles, and maybe Paul doing a tournament report on the Converging Wills event later this week. So it's going to be a pretty packed week this week and moving forward. But let's talk about some spoilers. First off, the video trend continues. We had 2 new videos over the last week, which were both really cool. I really liked the one for Helen. I thought that was really creative with the
Can we Kiki's in the chat for exploration coming back?
Also, yeah, let's get Kiki's in the chat for exploration. But we are going to talk about Leica first. This is like the Stragaria of Beasts, I think is how I would pronounce that word. Babatunde, good to see you, friend. Players cannot chase 2 spells named Therion Morphing. Fire-based resonators you control gain untouchable in public zones as long as your life is higher than your opponent's life. Just clarifying that they can't be targeted. Remove a beast card in your graveyard from the game. This card deals 200 damage to target player, to target J/Resonator and each player with the highest life total. Play this ability only once per turn, and you can Judgment for 1 by paying red and discarding a card named Therion Morphing. You need 2 matches this week now. Hey, look, we put a feature match out last week, didn't we? No, it was the progression series because I was trying to not die. And so flipped over to her other side, we have Leica Stragaria of the Beast. First off, can we just say I really enjoy the fact that both of these rulers so far have different art on their front side and their back side. Yay, we're back. She is an 8/4 with a bunch of different races. Calling a Magic Stone does not cause this card to rest. Enter. Beast Resonators you control gain +2/+2 and Swiftness until end of turn. She does not have Swiftness, keep that in mind. Fire Beast Resonators you control gain Barrier and Untouchable in public zones as long as your life total is higher than your opponent. Remove a beast from the graveyard, deals 400 damage to target thing and each player with the highest life during each player's turn. The other thing that we have learned about her is probably from Therion Morphing. We have seen the images of what her other kind of forms will be, like what she will be probably turning your other beasts into: a bear form, a were-rabbit form, and a bird form, which is interesting. Not sure exactly how that will also apply to maybe her Therion Morphing, but I imagine this is more to shift other people into these beast forms. So let's talk about Leica. Mike, what are your thoughts about biker, bitey, dino, or transforming Lady, excuse me.
Bless you. And I like her.
Hey,
Ah.
there we
So
go.
I for one, am not a big fan of red rulers. That's something that's kind of known about me. I'm typically
Fair enough.
a every single other color for the most part. Um, but to be fair, beastly biker lady, leather pants mommy, just really does hit different when you're kind of coming from like space adventure hero cluster, which kind of got me like I appreciate it, but like at some point you just go too far beyond
Yeah,
space
sure,
and
sure, sure. We're
future.
tired about being in the robots. We're tired of
I'm a
getting
little
in the
tired.
robots.
I'm tired of being in Gundam. Gundam was cool, but we had 7 sets of Gundam. But
6.
6, you're right. Sorry, my bad. Anyway,
Listen,
I can't count. But it's nice to have sort of like this traditional, like grounded fantasy adventure now, and it seems like they're kind of like I don't know, they're pulling back a little bit of inspiration from like other times in Faust history. Like this is not the first time we're seeing like modern technology in a fantasy setting. Uh, Kane had a gun.
Kane did have a gun.
Like, come on.
Kane did indeed have a gun.
So I don't know. It's just kind of cool to see them kind of stick with this, and I really like Mad Max Lady. She's really great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Paul, what are your thoughts?
I like that red gets a little bit more of an identity push here, in that these cards cannot be touched on the chase. Untouchable is the new keyword that we're seeing with this ruler. I think having that built into red is a really, really interesting push. And red just got belligerence too as a new keyword.
Yeah,
That's kind of more in its realm than not. So that's very fascinating to me that we're seeing red kind of develop and change. I think the aggressive nature of this color is going in new directions, which I think is fascinating. Usually aggro is very one note, but they're like, hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna go in these like other directions to kind of make red feel threatening again.
Mm-hmm.
And I like
What
that. I appreciate
one
that.
of the interesting things about Red's identity in FAO that notably as one of the like it's the risk, right? Is the fact that tying the line between too fast and explosive and kill you versus too slow and can't actually like maintain, like will always get over, like is impossible to get under control, right? Like it just can't possibly get under control and it always fizzles out, right? This is the like weird line that red decks have always been in Force of Will. And again, keeping in mind that this is under development, I totally get it. The design of this card, the design of this card to me is like, as long as we see what her support suite looks like and what the resonators are, what the spells are, the initial design of this red ruler to me feels perfect for defining that line and helping her find the true point where she's not too aggressive that she cuts under everyone too fast and hits a format of like FTKs and like unanswerable stuff, but she's also not too slow that she can't put up a ground game against control. The fact that on turn 1 she will not have untouchable, like she's not going to have it, so you will be able to kind of mess with her initial plays, or she'll have to burn resources right out the gate to set up untouchable, which then leaves her to having fewer resources to be able to push in, right? I think that's a really, really good balance. I do really like how limited it is, that it's just specifically Fire Beast, so it's not protecting burn spells, it's not protecting things like Killua, Fossil Girl, like it's very specific, but it feels in kind with her engine. Also, that first line about players cannot chase dispels called Therion Morphing is incredibly relevant, because Therion Morphing, the spell, targets a resonator you control. So if it was chaseable, your opponent could just kill the thing you were trying to shift in response. Therefore, to me, with the presence of how much good spot removal we have in this game, would make that card unplayable. Like you would just know for a fact against this ruler that you would just never ever try to kill their stuff until they try to convert it. And so now you can't do that.
Really
you have
like
to actually sit on that.
I also really like the fact that it's an entirely separate line from the as long as your life is higher than your opponent's life. They could have had that same line, but they decided from the get-go, like, just out of the box, you are getting unchaseable Therian morphings, and you are going. Like, you
Yeah,
cannot
and it's
stop your
only on her
fourth
ruler
card.
side. Only on her ruler side, which is also very important, right? She will lose that benefit when she flips over to the other side, which I also think is very relevant. Like, Steven's in the chat being very anti-red. I hear you, Steven. I get it. This to me feels like the perfect balance of like I said, it as I read this card feels like it is finding the exact perfect line. It's not right out the gate being able to set it up. And the other thing to note is that like the burn damage thing can't actually really be used as a win con. Keep that in mind, because it only hits the player with the highest life. So she can't be like, oh, I got you down to 2, remove a Beast Resonator, kill you. You don't have the highest life. She can't use it as a burn to kill you, which I also
Unless you
think
put
is
your
a
own
good
life down
threat.
to 100.
And then you also just draw, so that's bad.
Wait, what?
Because it's each player with the highest life total. So then you kill both of them.
If you have 100 and they have 200, you don't have the highest life total.
Oh, that's true. Sure, but that's not what she's trying to do.
Sparks OTK is real, Jeremy, and I can prove
okay.
it.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Sure. But I think this design is very cool. It's a design for like I think this is what our red players have been kind of asking for. Even the red players that I know have said that like Fow has a hard time finding that line for aggro. And out the gate, this feels like it's designed in such a way that it hits the line very, very well. Like it finds the line very, very, very easily. I will say the other thing about this that I'm interested in is we know for a fact that there are 2 sub-rulers in this set. And I want to go out on a limb that I do not think Leica is getting one. I do not think Leica is getting a sub-ruler for the fact that she can make, and here's why. Here's my theory. She can make other resonators into J-rulers, and when she flips, she doesn't have to tap to call stone. This to me feels like she will have enough ways to put J-ruler presence out that will mitigate the fact that she is by herself calling stones. Like, that to me feels like a safe bet, I guess I should say. I do not think she is going to be one of the 2 with the sub-rulers.
That's
I think
whatever
it's also
sub-rulers is her motorcycle.
It's also notable that Crimson Wolf does not work very well with Leica. So if you do not like Crimson Wolf, congratulations.
Because it's not a beast.
It's not a beast.
It's just a wolf.
It's just a wolf. It's not even a werewolf. It's not a lycanthrope. It's just a wolf. So
just a
you
wolf.
can splash a wolf package in if you really want to, but it's not necessarily something you need to do, and not even something that works synergistically with this deck.
Yeah, for sure. Which is good. I like it. Give red different options. The other ruler that we saw spoiled in what was a very cool video. Seriously, if you have not watched this video for the reveals, you need to go watch them. They are sick. Speaking of other things you need to go do, I haven't talked about it. Tell your stores that pre-orders right now for for Trinity Cluster Thought of the Trinity are now available at Odyssey Games in the description, and pre-orders for second quarter circuit kit are now available too. So let your stores know down below. Forgot to mention that at the top. Next up, we have Helen, the Witch of the Ruins. Players cannot move cards from their removed area to another zone as a cost. Solarization. Witch cards gain treasure and all attributes when they are revealed from your deck by an exploration ability you control, or while they are in your removed area and were removed by the exploration ability of cards you control. 0, Exploration 2. Play this ability only during your turn, so she can explore on both players' turns. Judgment. Play this Judgment only if you control a card named Remnants of the Plane. I think it's Plane, right? Or the Ruin. Remnants of the Ruin. And 3 or more Witch Resonators with different names when your removed area removed by an exploration ability you controlled. I would also like to preface the fact that it doesn't say exploration ability of this card. It just says exploration ability. Let's get those Kikis in the chat, boys. We're playing Kikis again. For sure.
My
For
hyperfixation character is back.
the hyperfixation Kikis. Yay!
Kiki stalks through the roof.
Kiki stunks. Let's see. And then yeah, Helen comes back and Asmodeus gets to come off the ban list. Because you just get paired up against Helen. Probably not yet. And then she flips over into 2 times the square root of 6, the route to the perfect number. She is a 0-18 with Eternal. If you're, I guess so small from here. If your life would become higher than 5,000, it becomes 5,000 instead. It's mainly because my screen is so far away from me, Mike. Chill out. If your life would become 5,000, it becomes 5,000 instead. If you would take damage, lose life, or pay life by any ability or effect you control, your life is reduced by double that much instead. At the beginning of your end phase, check X is even or odd, where X is your life divided by 100. X, or if it's even, your life becomes your current life divided by 2. If it became 100, this way you win the game. Odd, your life becomes triple your current life total multiplied by 100, and you can remove a rune counter from a card in your removed area to prevent the next damage that would be dealt to you this turn. Oh gosh. So, I do want to say one thing real quick about Helen, that I immediately see a CR update or her final text will be changed so that specifically that ability of if your life would be changed will be added to by an effect other than this card's. That's important because under the current CR, setting your life total higher or lower to a certain number counts as gaining or losing life. Meaning if you are at an even life total and at that, you immediately die because it will be because the set your life total to half your current life will then become doubled to set your life total to all of your current life being 0 and you will die. I'm so glad this says under development. I'm pretty sure it will say, like, other than this card's effect.
I hope it doesn't, because I just want to dead myself. I want to turbo lose the game.
Math.deck. She has 5 known witches at this point. We've seen 1. We know there are 4 others that were shown in her video. So that's a lot. I mean, if you play a full play set of all 4, that's 20 cards in your deck, plus all the other witches we have, like Witch Tribal.deck, plus Kikis and treasures. I also imagine that I really do think that she is probably getting one of the sub-rulers. Like, she and Lucy, to me, feel like the 2 that are going to have sub-rulers for sure, but this is pure speculation. Okay, I've given my initial thoughts. I will pass the mic over to Paul.
When I first looked at this card, I was like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. How do I win? And then I had to read it again, and I was like, oh, if I get to 100, I win. So I'm like digging through my own life to win the game because my life is the ruin. We're getting real transcendental very quickly.
Yeah, essentially start the end phase at 200 life is the goal currently. If you can get your life to exactly 200 at the beginning as this card's effects resolves, you win. Provided that this card or the CR gets updated.
Is there a world where this just gets combo banned with things like Whispers from the Abyss or Final Battle?
I got thoughts.
I could see whispers. I could see whispers for sure. I don't think Final Battle. I could certainly see whispers as a potential. I think there's an element where, like, to me, it feels like the even trying to judgment her is so extensive that, like, I don't think you have to combo ban her with things like Final Battle. But I could see whispers. I also could see her getting combo banned with Moonshade. That's like incredible life manipulation just by creating will. So I could very easily see her get comboed with Moonshade. You could also, she probably starts just playing the Shock Rocks. if I'm being honest. She
Mhm.
also is a light. She also is a light ruler. So like when she judgments, you can like recover the awakened magic stone, the earth stones, and have like some extra will. But yeah,
Also, Remnants of the Ruin. We're not sure what that is. I'm guessing just by like naming convention, it's probably an addition.
I would imagine
And I'm not
it's
sure how
probably
that
like
would, if this
it's
is
probably
explore, put
something.
it into the field.
Yeah, it's probably if this is explored, you get to put it in, and probably has eternal. I imagine. More mind games with first lie, bro. If you cast first lie when you're playing this deck, I'm just gonna girl staring at and then kill it. That's what I'm gonna do.
That's
That's my
real too.
thoughts.
You can
Mike,
just remove the Eternal and
yeah,
just
you
kill
can.
it.
Mike, thoughts?
Ah, where to begin? So I get what they're doing with this card. It's very cute. I don't know if I like it though. I'm I
Okay,
am the most torn I've ever been. Because number A,
number A.
we've got exploration back, which means Kiki's back, which means some of my favorite things that have ever happened have come back.
Sure.
Letter two.
Letter two.
I've talked for a very long time about how I find issues with FAU's current new player experience, if I want
Sure.
to say it that way.
Sure.
Seeing this card in a pack that I open as a new player is going to leave me scratching my head like nobody's business. And I know you're going to say reading the card eventually will explain the card as you learn to play it.
That's not what I was gonna say. But continue.
But it is like I I don't know. I feel like any new player sitting down and either having to read this card when they pull it from the pack or read it alongside it at the table with a bunch of people who just opened a bunch of this product.
Sure.
They sit here with their beast deck, like, I'm gonna make big beasties. This card's gonna turn into a bear. She's a wolf. Yada yada yada.
Sure.
Whatever. And he's gonna
Sure.
be like, all right, cool. What deck are you playing? I'm playing Helen. Cool. What does Helen
Math.
do? Well, check this side out. And they'll be like, I don't think I ever want to read ever again in my entire life. I would rather remove my ability to read. I would like to learn American Sign Language and only be able to communicate through that reading this card.
Yeah, for sure. And I would 100% agree with you on that. And it's not, but I'm not going to give the reading the card explains the card argument. I will say that regardless of the weird math stuff on the two divided by square root of 6, we can agree that Helen's core mechanic is exploration, is the exploration
Yes.
concept, right? You and I can agree on that for sure, right?
100%.
The beauty of this is we haven't actually talked about it because we haven't seen the cards. The two starter decks for this cluster are different rulers than the main set, and the blue-white starter deck is the exploration deck. There is a
Interesting.
starter deck with a different ruler that is tied to the exploration mechanic. And
That makes me happy.
That to me is like, I will forgive the complexity of Helen because they are giving a starter deck a different exploration ruler as a concept. So if you like the exploration stuff but don't want to play Helen,
You got
you have a
somewhere to go.
line. You have a line to go there, right? So that's my argument. Is Helen complicated as hell? Absolutely. Do they have a nice on-ramp for newer players to try the exploration mechanic and not have to dig into the complexity of Helen if they don't want to? Absolutely. And I feel like that is exactly what they should do with this. So that to me is really nice. And I only know that because it's on the sell sheet. The sell sheet specifically says that the blue-white starter deck is support for the exploration mechanic.
See, I can't read, so that makes a lot of sense.
Also,
at this
yeah,
point.
that's fair. That's fair. Any other
Yeah,
thoughts about Helen?
I got really not much else to say. I am glad that this is tied to a light ruler, so that you can't just put this kind of win the game trigger on a ruler in a good color. And
I mean, white's pretty good, but we'll talk about that.
hush hush. Anyway, and I'm also really glad that it's tied to an exploration ability, which means that if you're playing the game in the way that makes sense, where it's like you're playing the exploration abilities of her out of the box, like turn 1, turn 1.5, turn 2, turn 2.5, and only if you get lucky enough to have that exact lineup of things, you can flip her. I think that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I do appreciate that. Do I like the fact that this ability really ties into a lot of very busted life loss cards that I still think, hey, Whispers never should have been unbanned. I'm just going to put that out there.
Sure.
I think
For
that
sure.
card's already a problem. There's a lot of problem cards. I'm gonna pitch an idea that I learned from designing my game Convergence, which is currently in development
I'm listening.
and will eventually be featured on this channel at some point once I convince Jeremy.
Hey.
But
I'm
something I learned is
okay.
that one of the colors that I created is focused on life loss and being at either below half your life or at like 10 life. The game starts 60, 30 life triggers, 10 life triggers, and a
Sure.
lot of life loss gaining triggers with it. And something I learned is that you should never give your players the ability to choose whatever life they want to pay. Because at that
Oh, sure.
point, you break things wide open. Like, I have a Final Battle clone, literally give everything -X, -X, and you pay X amount of life where that's the amount that you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I cap it at 20, so you can only pay up to a third of it. And I feel like that
Oh,
was
sure.
that perfect middle ground. And I
Jesse
think
Jekyll,
that
don't we? Sorry, just want to jump in. Jesse Jekyll
yeah,
says, "Why don't we have a card that turns your life gain into burn?" We don't. We have cards that stop you from gaining life. We also have Daji, which is a villain quick cast that says if you send a dragon from deck to graveyard, you deal your opponent 500 plus X, where X is the amount of life gained that turn. So you kind of like undo the life gain, but we don't have anything that like directly says, hey, instead of gaining life, you're taking that as damage. At least that I can think of.
though to be
Yeah, I
fair,
don't think we have a replacement effect.
if you hit the odd cost of this where your life becomes your current life multiplied by 3 times 100, if you dodge that, you said it's when you gain life, dodge deals that damage.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that just kill somebody if you're able to go from like 1,000 to 5,000? You're not
So then
technically do that.
you'd take 4,000 damage. You take 4,500. So you'd go down to 500.
Oh, you take it. Okay.
Yeah. So specifically, Daji just says, however much life you gained, undo that plus 500 damage. If you send a dragon to grave. We have the card? Oh, Scorching Mountain Trail. That's true. The demonic world. The demonic world. You're right. It doesn't come up very often, but yes, thank you for correcting.
I also
me.
can't read, so that's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, this is interesting. It has me very curious to see what else we could get out of it. It also makes me very curious to see what her sub ruler would be. So I'm curious to see what comes out of that. And treasures are nice. So like maybe she gets a sub ruler that lets her tag, which I would imagine is an extension rule, not a sub ruler. And this set doesn't have any extension rules in it, so that's also kind of weird. But we'll see. That's all we have in terms of new cards. I imagine we will probably see a new video from the company within the next couple days, so I'm very excited about that. But this past weekend,
Market Machine's back online.
we had Converging Wills back at it, hosting a major international tournament, and it was a banger. So I have some details here. We had a total of 52 players. 10 from Asia, 18 from Europe, 22 from the USA, and 2 from Canada. So really good spread of international community, really high
Canadians
caliber
still play
players.
this game? Crazy.
Yeah, for sure. 2 Canadian stores ordered circuit kits.
Hell yeah.
So I do want to talk about the ruler breakdown here really quick. So Paul will have all of this in a tournament report, and you can see the top 8 lists on our channel and the top 8 breakdown on Converging Wills website and everything else. But we'll do a video about it. But Typhon the Infinite, 1 copy. Christie plus Snow White, 1 copy. 2 Solarias, a Duska Girl, 2 Alice plus Grimm, 3 K3s, Friend from Another World, Foot Kaguya, a Violet, an Olga with Child of Death, a Lenneth Yggdrasil, 4 Fault Gold plus Seer of the Blue Moon, Alice in Wonderland plus Fault Gold, 2 Killua plus Child of the Wind Moon, as well as 3 Killua plus Child of the Darkness Moon, Little Red Aristella, Fault Gold plus Liberator of Wind, Christie the Wind Tracker and Seer, a Lucifer, Arcana of Light, which is Stephen Jeswain, which we'll talk about that. Arcana of Light. the freaking
The-
draft ruler.
The world's champion.
Yeah.
Steve just went has my entire heart. I love that man with all
Grim,
my heart.
Grim the Fairy Tale Prince plus Puss in Boots. 2 double Pandoras. 2 Nyarlathotep Game Master, although I'm not sure which J ruler side they were on. Olivia Thunder Empress. Alice in Wonderland plus Little Red Riding Hood. 2 Tina plus Alice. A Reinhardt plus Child of the Ethereal Moon. 2 Liberator of Winds plus Lumias. 1 Almerius plus 0, the Apprentice Sage. 1 Liberator plus Little Red Riding Hood. 2 Odins. A Grim Fairy Tale Prince plus Little Red Riding Hood. An Abdul Seer combo. Alice Tales of Infant Creation. Deus Ex Machina. Little Red plus Seer. A Branhart plus Tina. A Hyde plus X the Black Cat. 52 players.
How the fuck did Kaguya win?
The top 8 spread was K3 Wolves, Almerius plus 0, Solaria, 2 Killuas, double Pandora with Stephen Holsheiser, Alice plus Fault Gold, and a Lumia Sherry. I think that's everybody, right? Did I hit everybody?
Bruh.
Yep.
I talked about, I think that's everybody.
Alice
First
Bahamut.
place, I got Alice and Bahamut. First place was Jeremy Lindley on K3 with Wolves. Second place was Almerius 0 with Matthew Lindley. The Lindley brothers are on a tear this season.
The new Miles is nice.
They are rocking it out with Almerius 0. And third place was Tissue 69 with Solaria, as well as fourth place was Subtle N Hero from Michigan up north playing Killua. And then just a little bit of a breakdown. Top 3 cards that were used in the main decks. Killua Fossil Girl in the City.
No surprises.
Dark
there.
Alice Rabbit Princess, and Garion. Garion making a return to the environment. Pretty popular here.
Gary.
Interesting.
Not what I expected to be the top 3 cards. Like Killua, I expected to be one of the top cards. Dark Alice for sure, but for sure. I will note that we did have 8 decks running a full playset of Crimson Wolves in the event, and only 2 topped. Top 3 cards used in the sideboard, as expected: Replicant Shiva, Rogue Spectator, and then Girl Staring At as the third most represented card. Top 3 Magic Stones used were Magic Stone of Moonshade, Pure Heartstone, and the Wolf Stone. Duh. This was across all decks, not just the top 8 decks, right? That's not necessarily representative of what we saw in the top 8, because only the K3, only the Wolf decks were running Crimson Moonstone.
Jeremy,
obviously.
can you answer a quick question for me?
I will answer a fast question for you.
Does the Wolfstone count as a moon for Kaguya's
Yes.
enter ability to
Yes.
draw a card? Oh, I'm
Yes.
so bad.
There are people over on Twitch who did a stream of it, so it's archived there. We did not cover it. So interesting breakdown. Olivia did lose its winning in, which was interesting. And Steven over here playing Turbo, Hyper Turbo, Electra, Hyper Turbo, Animate Big Dude,
Big dudes.
Arcana of Light.
That's
Rocking
the
it
sickest deck I've ever heard. That's just okay. Steven made a point here. You could play the most garbage ruler you've ever seen, but if you put Electra on the board, you win.
Unless your opponent's an Abdul.
Otherwise, but let's say your opponent's playing a good deck, then you win the game.
Excuse me?
You heard me, Jeremy.
Wow.
You heard me.
Shots absolutely fired.
You heard me.
For sure. I do think Abdul's pretty good. So interesting spread of stuff in the top 8. Overall impressions as I look at it, we had aggro, we had combo, we had mid-range, we had control, we had single ruler, we had saga cluster tag ruler, we had grim cluster tag ruler, we had throw a bunch of J rulers at him ruler. We had, it was quite honestly one of the most unique spreads of everything else I've seen. And kudos to the Lindley brothers. Although they were playing wolves in the deck, if you actually look at the decks, they are pretty creative builds, right? The idea
So
of like it was good. It was cool.
So, Jeremy, I actually want to bring up a really good point. I'm glad you brought up the fact that only, like, the wolves aren't the thing that drives this deck. The wolves are just a piece of it. Jeremy Lindley is playing Kaguya drawing off of each moon, and you just play a cycle of moons just over and over again. Like, it's its own encompassing engine. That's
Ban
smart.
Electra win. I don't. Electra gets banned when Darktree gets banned.
There we go. Hopefully soon.
For sure.
Fuck
Here
Darktree.
first, folks. Ban Darktree.
I'm not
Listen,
even. I don't
I've been
even. I
saying
don't
this
even think
for
it's necessary.
years.
I don't think
I've
it's
been saying
necessary.
it for years, though. Darktree's shitty to play and shitty to play against. Don't even talk to me about
No one
Darktree.
played it at this event. Not a single person played Darktree at this event.
Because it feels shitty to play it.
It wasn't there.
To me, I'll leave it to you guys too. I'll toss the mic over to you guys in a second. To me, the big takeaways from this event is that we were absolutely right to. We've discussed it several times on this podcast that this meta is not defined by a quote unquote best deck or quote unquote a tier list necessarily. This meta, I do truly believe, I think this event shows it, that it is based on the 4 questions. Like it is a meta. We were talking about this before the pod too, of like there are some very clear and present things that you have to be considerate of in deck building, but even if you're the person who's representing those threats, it's not going to carry you. You can't just rely on being that threat to be what carries you, right? If wolves were truly the unbeatable tier 0 kind of threat, we would have seen 8 out of 8 wolves. We saw 2. Right, we saw 2 out of the 8 wolf decks in the top 8, and we saw a spread of other good stuff. Again, the Lindley brothers are very creative deck builders, and I think that 2 of them almost never played the same deck event to event. They are very big ingenuity players.
I also like the fact that they didn't play the same list. Like, a lot of good players will bring the same list because they tested against one another, and they're like, this is the best deck. They brought 2 entirely different decks. Like, that's cool to me.
Yeah.
That's really cool to me.
Yeah. By the way, the finals came down to the final match. Game 3 of the final match came down to the magic cylinder, essentially the 2-drop spell, Calamity Shield. Yeah, it came down to Calamity Shield, but I think. There's this element to me of this environment is one. This is what we talked about before the pod, and I think it's still true here. I think this event proves it too. This is a meta that will reward the most well-rounded in all aspects players, regardless of what decks they choose to bring, because I think you have to be able to make good meta calls. You have to be able to do good deck building and creative tech choices to be able to catch people off guard. You have to have good techs, and you have to have good reads on plays. You can't just be blinded. I will go back to this about Tyler Tompkins at our locals is a very good player. He's qualified for Worlds. He's top 8'd multiple times in different GP level events with lots of players and everything else. But there is an element of and I love you, Tyler, but there's an element of if you go back and watch the finals of our Circuit Series event that we did, the final match, I think K3 beat Grim Alice from a losing position because of Tyler not necessarily having the best read on what Ivan was currently representing. And so he took a kind of a weird play line. Do I think that makes Tyler a bad player? Absolutely not. But I think it speaks to the fact that success will be defined not just by what deck you bring, but playing tight, playing well, making good tech calls, making good meta reads, making good player reads from beginning to end. This is a format that rewards the highest of skill players who have the most well-rounded kind of experience. And I get why people necessarily in the competitive scene think that's frustrating, but like I gotta tell you, from a commentator, content producer, community manager side of things, friggin' love it. It's the best. Yeah, Shimpo, he overextended a bit. Yeah, for sure. Which I mean, like, I think it's just like, again, everybody makes mistakes, and I don't think it was just that. I don't think that it was, oh, Ivan's on K3 Wolves, so Tyler just loses. Like, I don't think so. I think if you go back and watch it, I think Tyler was in a winning game state. He just overextended a bit and got punished for it. So that to me makes things exciting, and that's my kind of table speak about like the takeaways from the Converging Wills event as we go towards Mini, with about a month of prep, a little bit less than a month of prep time before that. I'll toss it to either Mike or Paul, whichever one of you guys want to talk about your kind of, in looking at the breakdown and looking at what topped and looking at how things went, what your thoughts are.
Mike, go.
Oh my god. Oh, hi. Hello. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of reiterate what I said before. I'm very glad to see that like an interesting deck, like multiple interesting decks, took those top spots, where it's not just like how quickly can I get Wolf out and knock my opponent in the face like 5 billion times. Like that deck's a mid-range deck. That's sick to see. That's insane to see. That
K3 deck is not an aggro
reach.
deck. It's a mid-range deck. Yep.
It's a mid-range deck with reach, and that's so cool to me. Because it's like, it's a value engine. You just continuously get value off of these moons. And then, like, you just sometimes happen to have the wolf that just domes your opponent for a bunch of damage, and it's like, great, you had a bunch of turns to watch me draw cards and then try and figure out a way to deal with them. That's fair foul, and that's so cool. And I don't think I've seen fully fair foul like that in a very long time. And the fact that that won, props. Jeremy Lindley, you have my kudos.
Jeremy Lindley, I do want to say my favorite point, and this goes to show again the high quality meta read on both. I honestly think I'm going to throw both Lindley brothers under the bus slightly. Yeah.
Good,
but
good.
Also I know them both, so it's okay. So there was a particular line. There was a particular line where Matthew was going in for a very powerful play. It was probably going to push a lot of damage and set him up for a lethal line that same turn with a flip. He was going in with a wolf. He then goes, we attempt to light curtain the wolf with Jeremy Lindley to try to negate the damage and heal and everything else. And then because we were playing Almarius and Zero, we had put +1/+1 counters on the wolf. So we used some +1/+1 counter. No, we had +1/+1 counters on Almarius. Used the +1/+1 counters on Almarius to play Reign of Saints to kill his own wolf so that Light Curtain couldn't kill it. Jeremy then flashes in a Lorite for 1 that doesn't have a target, just puts a body on board, which serves as a blocker for later, and then flashes in the 1 of 3-drop Reflect Refrain, which is a Jeremy Lindley special, to cancel the Reign of Saints. That all resolves. That all happens. Still before Light Curtain, Matthew plays a second Reign of Saints, successfully killing his own wolf to stop the life gain. But Reign of Saints has a kicker card that says your opponent removes every card in their graveyard from the game. And just earlier that turn, Jeremy had discarded 2 wolves to hand size, so he could try to reanimate them off of Wolfstone. Like, that's what I'm talking about in terms of, like, good meta reads, good meta tech calls. Like, Reign of Saints in that deck was such a good choice to play into this mirror or whatever. We flash forward or whatever. Jeremy's kind of low on cards, but redraws and replenishes or whatever. And then Jeremy makes a misplay in the fact of we get the Calamity Shield. We try to swing in with a fairy token in the air that was generated by Matt. And we see, in response to no blocks, pitch armored weaponized Blade Dragon to try to pump up the fairy. Jeremy responds to the activate ability of the weaponized Blade Dragon with the Calamity Shield, because you have to pass priority, which is the misplay there, because then what happened was Matthew was able to then redirect the target of the Blade Dragon to the Almarius that hadn't swung, instead of the fairy that was currently swinging unblockable. so that he didn't take 1400 from the Calamity Shield. Like, it was so, like, you gotta play tight from beginning to end, and it didn't. It worked out that like Jeremy got there in the end. It was a good match. It was good, strong, but like those are clear examples of like even in the finals, even in the hands of good players, like you gotta play tight, and it is much about tech choice, playing tight, knowing the matchup, knowing the meta, and I just think that was really cool to see play out, and it's just a good lesson and takeaway as we go into this, because there's a very real opportunity, there's a very real possibility that like Wolves just don't top at Minnesota. Like, it is possible. I would not be surprised to see a Wolf in the top cut, but as we saw yesterday, over the weekend, there were 8 Wolf decks and only 2 topped. It's not a sure thing, which I think was interesting.
I'm right. Both Wolf decks that converted won.
First and second. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's where folks feel the pushback.
Sure.
Is, I mean, yeah, like there are so many ways to getting around Wolves, and it's either I can't figure out if folks are just not respecting it enough, or if in the hands of good players, Wolves just are a really strong mid-range pile, right? I won't give too many of my goodies away because I do have a tournament report coming out.
Hey-o.
But I will say the sheer variety of decks, and then only Killua is the Hero Cluster Ruler that topped in this last event. That was really interesting to me. Like, there's been no other, like everyone's kind of just said, okay, Hero Cluster's over. We're playing Pilgrim Memories format now.
Yeah.
Everything else sucks, and we're gonna play other stuff now. That and Dark Tree are kind of like the only Hero Cluster decks I've seen, which I think is really interesting in these like Circuit Series, Converging Wills events and stuff.
Yeah. I think the big takeaway for me is that like even after a 52-person event, because of the diversity that we saw, because of the deck building we saw, because of like the takeaways of what we've now learned from this event or whatever, like I am still completely like, I don't know what's going to top at Minnesota. You know what I mean? And like having the fact that we have had a meta that we've already had some pretty decent sized events going into our first GP from a month, 3-4 weeks from now, that's like a pretty cool, exciting life to go with. And, and I will say with regards to Wolves, I think that the beauty of the ban list conversation is that like, I think we can safely say now that there is a very real possibility that it can at least be discussed to combo ban Wolf and Wolfstone, which I think is fair. But it's also not so crazy that it's just like, oh, we need to ban it right now. Like I get it. It's one of those things where like you can't make the perfect meta. No one's going to be happy all the time. But I think luckily this environment in particular, like I get that there are some people who are just like frustrated by Wolves, or that it can be frustrating to deal with against it based on the matchup. And there are still other people who just don't care crap. They're like, you play as many Wolves as you want, I'll kill every single one. It's fine. Like they're just playing the answers to it. It's not a big deal. That like their presence goes back to that's why they're on the questions list, right? That's why they're question number 1 on the questions list. But like every meta is going to have a first question. Does that make sense? And so I think the tournament data is such that like I'm fine keeping them as the first question, but I'm also not like this is the only question, because it certainly isn't. Mike, you said something before the podcast that the ceiling in terms of what the decks can do is so high, but the ceiling is also very wide. Like it is very, 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 very wide. And I think that is what leads to kind of this really creative, experimental, fun to explore meta, because you have a lot of options and you have to be ready for everything. but you also can't be ready for everything. So that's where the meta call comes into the place of like, what am I hedging my bet that I'm probably not going to see, so I can just accept that maybe this bad matchup is something I have to deal with and hope that I don't hit it, or like make the good call to be able to sideboard to be able to answer it if needed, which is why I say this is a meta that rewards players who are skilled from A to Z. So it's cool to see.
I think it's also fair to say that sure, wolves are shaping the meta because of all of the things you've talked about just now.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they are the meta game, right?
Yeah.
We still have this dialogue where there's like this underlying assumption that because wolves win events, or because wolves are really strong and really good, wolves are the only deck to play. And competitive players don't think like that. Competitive players say, okay, this is the deck that I should be focusing my attention on because it has a lot of steam and a lot of popularity right now. So what are its weaknesses? Like, you have to go a bit deeper with your analysis. I do think wolves are very strong and they deserve your respect. So in your testing, recognize what the deck does and take it apart. And if the deck still does well, even with everyone respecting it that much, then you have an issue.
But I don't think the data shows that right now, right? I don't think the data shows.
It just doesn't. Yeah.
I don't think the data supports the idea that the deck can't be answered, right?
Yeah.
And natural variance is such that if we were to run back the top 8 from Converging Wills on Friday, like say we take the top 8 matchups and we ran it again on tomorrow, right? Because of the variance in this meta, because of player experience, because of recognizing play lines and how card variance works, I genuinely believe that it is very likely that we could see a completely different finals. Like you could run that same top 8 again and it could just happen differently. Which is why, and I think that speaks to the idea of, like you said, like the wolves is something that is question number 1 and it's shaping the meta, but it's not necessarily like the only presence in the meta that you have to respect or have to play to consider being successful, which I think is great. I think it makes for creative deck building. I think makes for creative challenges, and I think it rewards skill. But could Arcana of Light take it? Listen, Steven Jessway, my homie, paired up against so many wolf decks at the event. I think he paired up against 4 of the 8.
Jeez.
This man hit 4 of the 8 wolf decks. So, like, again, matchups, right? If that day had been any different in terms of what he got paired up against, right? Or, Olivia could have top 8'd. We lost the top 8 to
You took it from
the winning in on Olivia, right? I just, like, that to me is what's so fun, is that this is good data to see what people are playing and see what good, like, decks are being successful or what they're trying to do. But it's also, like, the decks that are being successful and what they're trying to do or what's on the bubble are still so incredibly diverse that it just, like, there is a part of me that's like, man, God, I would love to be a competitor right now because I think it would be a lot of fun to try my hand and try to prove myself with something cool. Like, this is the kind of environment that I would want to prove myself in. But also, like, no, I can't do that anymore. I'm just going to commentate. I can't compete anymore.
You're not going to pull me back.
You're not going to pull me back. You're going to just keep me at the commentator's booth.
But Jeremy, here's a goal.
If there's side events, though, sign me up. Cool. I gotta go get the solid gold Abdul. Why would you do this to me? But if there's side, I would imagine that there probably will be side events at the event. Usually, Games and Geek does side events on day 2. So who knows? Maybe I'll convince a bunch of other people to commentate so that I can go play in the side events in Minnesota again if there is one. And then I'll show you all the power of Abdul Seer. And then get paired up against all the wolf decks and just eat them for breakfast constantly. Nom, 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 nom. Shinpo, are there side events at GPs? Usually. I don't know if, I would imagine if they're going to. In the past, Games and Geek has announced side events prior to GPs. Like prior to the GP events. We have not seen any announced right now, but that doesn't mean that there won't be. I will say that I'm bringing the cube to Minnesota, so if anybody wants to hang out in Cube, we can do that. But I'll be bringing some decks just in case for day 2. We'll see you in the June event. A proper Abdul Seer. Yes. 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 I really like my Abdul Seer deck at this environment, honestly. I think it's pretty fun. But I mean, like, Patrick and I were talking about earlier. He used the word that there's too many boogeymen that could just suddenly end a run. And I would argue that it's not that there are boogeymen that just end a run, that the viability of so many different possible strategies exists, so much so that you can't possibly prepare for everything. And so the natural variance of things might be that you just happen to get blindsided by something you weren't expecting. But also I would argue that that's a mark of a skilled player to be able to pick up quickly what a deck is doing when it's unexpected and be able to pilot through it. Right? That's also a skill to be able to show. So, got to play into that as well. Side events at the 1K for sure. You have to drop. If you drop, you don't get top 32, top 64, so no one drops. At least on day 1, Shinpo. Yeah, usually no. There's usually no side events on day 1. It's usually like a day 2 event if it happens. Oenica, we'll see you in the June event. That's Caseyville, I believe, if that's what you're referring to. And I will be there commentating. And maybe Paul will finally make it down to Caseyville for once.
Depends. It just depends.
So, always Popper with custom loot. Yeah, for sure. That's also an event. There's so many circuit events happening on Discord and everything else. The OLS is doing a circuit event. Gigabytes Cafe in Georgia is doing a circuit event. I'm getting the reports from New York and California and Canada. Like, we're running events. It's good. You can play. So, any kind of closing thoughts? Mike, you've been dissociating for a bit.
I constantly dissociate, Jeremy. It's my coping mechanism.
That's fair. Any kind of closing thoughts about, like, meta thoughts or the concept of like what's being played, or just impact on the impact of shaping of a meta and how that operates, or anything?
I really enjoy the fact that there are as many decks that do have like this potential to hit the ceiling that, like, obviously Wolf has like been the boogeyman of the, week for us recently. But at the same time, like, even with Wolves doing well, there's a lot of other really strong decks that can hit that ceiling. The only problem I ever have, the only concern I ever have is that ceiling too high for new players to enjoy their decks without getting absolutely curb stomped in their first couple of turns of the game. I know that there's a lot of counterplay. I know that players should be building the decks to beat it. But for the average player coming into a GP, maybe with cards they just got,
oh sure,
is it too much?
At the GP level, I can argue that that's a potential. I would say that outside of the GP level, though, those players will benefit from the sheer diversity of what is available to play. That
I agree.
We don't like. There are some people who just don't want to play Wolves.
Facts. I would not.
You know what I mean?
Playing Wolves.
Like, do I think that Wolves are?
Do
Do I think that Wolves are good? Yes. Do I want to play them? No. Nothing against the Wolf package. It's just not my play style, right? So, like, I think that there is enough people who have the diversity of what they want to play that, like, going into a more casual or local level environment, like, I don't think that becomes a pressing issue, because it's not just Wolves as far as the eye can see. At the GP level, I don't even think it's Wolves as far as the eye can see, right? I think you could go an entire day without playing against Wolves based on how your record goes, which I think is fine. So, Converging Wills. Oh, the next Converging Wills event is in June. Well, I'll certainly try to play in that one. You got to send me advanced sneak peeks about what the playmats are, so I can know whether or not I should try to participate and how try-hardy I should be. That'll be Trinity Cluster. That'll be fun. Some of us have more than 2 brain cells and can't play Wolf/Red. You and me both.
You and me
both, Steven.
I love you so much, man.
Paul, any closing thoughts, friendo?
It feels like the format is really untapped, and no one's trying to solve it too much because there's no invite on the line necessarily. So At least not until April, which is just before we get
3
into Trinity
invites.
clusters.
So we have 2 GPs in this format. 2
Yeah.
in the United States. We have the Minnesota one, and we have an online one. And
Jeez.
Poissy in France is also in this format as well.
So then folks are
good
actively
time.
solving the format. My apologies. People are actively trying to solve the format, and it seems like wolves are the answer right now, but there is a lot of stuff. I mean, Solaria topping. Solaria got
I would-
seed, right? So,
I do want to say there is something to note about
Explore.
Solaria going in. This is the last little bit of a thing. Don't get me wrong. I think Solaria is very good because in the event that was from Nico Bro, Solaria also won that whole event that Nico Bro did. But in the Converging Wills event specifically, there was a really weird ruling with regards to Solaria's the Wind Solar Dragon and the Mana Dorks, that like the Mana Dork ability he gave, which did probably have an impact on the overall meta.
okay.
I can imagine that ruling is probably not going to stand for Minnesota, so don't worry about it. But Solaria is still very good. It's just like that was like maybe something that maybe skewed why it got first seed as opposed to maybe a lower seed. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I think I would agree with you, Paul. It's like the meta is we have the questions, but the best answers for those questions, I think, are still to be determined, right? And I think that's what makes this so exciting and why I'm excited to see what people bring to Minnesota. Let's break 100 players at Minnesota. Let's do it. That would be so hype. And with that, we'll close this out. So until next time, this has been myself, Demo73, and I've been joined, as always, by Paul Reisman.
See you in the tournament report.
And Mike Rance.
Where?
Class dismissed.